The cold wasn't the problem. That's the first thing we get wrong about the Ice Age. 20,000 years ago, during the peak of the last glacial maximum, the real challenge was the sheer unpredictability. One season, you're hunting reindeer on a vast, grassy steppe. The next, a sudden shift plunges your world into a deep freeze, turning familiar landscapes into impassable walls of ice. The climate didn't just change over centuries, it could flip in a generation, or even less. Your entire survival strategy could become obsolete overnight. And into this volatile world walked two kinds of humans. On one side, you had the Neanderthals. They were physically perfect for this environment, stocky, incredibly strong, with bodies built to conserve heat. They were the specialists, masters of their specific territory. If survival were just a test of brute strength and cold tolerance, they should have one. Then there was us, Homo sapiens. We were the newcomers, thinner, more gracile, seemingly less equipped for the brutal cold. The conventional story says we survived through better tools or bigger brains. But that's not quite right. The Neanderthals had complex tools. They had intelligence. They buried their dead. So what was the real difference? The mystery deepens when you look at the evidence. A Neanderthal might range within a familiar territory, a known world. But a shell from the Mediterranean Sea turns up in a cave in Central Europe, hundreds of miles from any coast. A piece of obsidian, a volcanic glass perfect for sharp tools, is found far from its mountain source. These aren't the possessions of Neanderthals. They belong to our ancestors. This is the first clue that we were playing a different game entirely. While one group was mastering a single environment, the other was building a network to survive all of them. The real battle wasn't against the mammoths or the cold. It was against isolation. And the secret weapon wasn't a sharper spearhead. It was a shared story. Think about what it takes to survive true scarcity. It's not about one strong hunter. It's about what happens when that hunter fails. When the reindeer don't migrate as expected, or when a sudden storm wipes out your food cache. In a small, isolated band, that single failure could mean extinction. You are vulnerable to every shock. This was the limitation Neanderthal groups faced, tight-knit, but ultimately confined. Their social world was often limited to those they saw every day. Now, contrast that with what archaeologists are finding at Homo sapiens sites from the same period. It's not just the exotic shells and stones. It's the evidence of a cognitive leap. We started adorning ourselves with beads, painting our bodies with ochre. This seems like decoration, but it's something far more profound. It's a signal. These were the first logos, the first uniforms. They said, I belong to this group. And crucially, that group identity could be recognized by people you hadn't seen in months or even years. You could encounter a stranger in a distant valley, see the same style of bead, and know you shared a connection. That tiny object was a passport to cooperation. This allowed for a radical new survival strategy, the distributed network. If your local valley suffered a drought, you might have known, through stories and exchanged gifts, of a group 2 weeks' travel away who had a surplus. That connection, maintained through symbolic culture and social ritual, was a lifeline. It was a form of insurance. Neanderthals, for all their strength, largely relied on the resources within their immediate reach. Homo sapiens were learning to tap into the resources of a continent. This required a new kind of thinking, the ability to conceive of us not just as your immediate family, but as a widespread tribe. You had to be able to trust, to cooperate, and to reciprocate with people you might only see once in your life. The shift was from individual endurance to collective resilience. It meant thinking in longer time frames. A gift given today might not be repaid for a year, but that reciprocal obligation created a bond that could save your children's lives. This social calculus, investing in relationships for long-term payoff, is a sophisticated cognitive skill. It's the foundation of what we now call social capital. In the face of an unpredictable ice age, building a wide, resilient web of human connection was more valuable than being the strongest hunter in a single, doomed valley. The survival of the fittest was becoming the survival of the most connected. But a social network is just potential. It's an empty highway. For it to mean anything, you need something to transport. For Ice Age humans, that something was innovation. And this is where their strategy truly exploded. A good idea no longer lived and died with a single brilliant individual in an isolated cave. Now, an innovation could travel. We see this in the archaeological record with what's called the cultural explosion. Suddenly, and with startling speed, new, highly specialized tools appear across vast distances. Not just simple hand axes, but sophisticated, purpose-built kits. The eyed needle, crafted from bone. This wasn't just for sewing basic clothing. It allowed for tailored, layered garments, parkas with hoods, waterproof boots. It was a revolution in portable climate control. Then there's the spear thrower, or atlatl, a simple lever that extended the arm, multiplying the force and accuracy of a throw. This one invention changed the dynamics of hunting, making it safer and more efficient. A single person in southern France invents a better way to fish. Through the networks of connection, that knowledge travels north and east. A band in what is now Poland adapts it for their local river conditions. Someone else improves the design of the bone hook. Each group adds its own tweak, its own local intelligence. This is cumulative culture, each generation standing on the shoulders of the previous, and each community across the continent contributing to a shared pool of knowledge. The innovation wasn't just the object, it was the system that allowed the object to spread and improve.
This system was powered by the very thing that built the network in the first place: storytelling and complex language. You can't teach someone to craft an eyed needle through mime. It requires explaining the nuance of selecting the bone, the angle of drilling, the technique of threading. This transmission of complex, non-intuitive information is a hallmark of our species. Around those fires, they weren't just sharing gossip, they were sharing manuals. They were trading the blueprint for a warmer winter or a more successful hunt. The network became an innovation engine, constantly testing, refining, and distributing the best ideas across the continent. It turned local ingenuity into a global, or at least a pan-continental, survival strategy. Your chance of surviving the next winter wasn't just about your own skill. It was about being plugged into the collective brain trust of your entire species. So you have these networks, and you have these innovations traveling along them. But what holds it all together? What prevents a distant group from just taking your gifts and never reciprocating? The glue was story. And we see this most powerfully in the places they left behind, the caves. When you look at the famous cave paintings at Lascaux or Chauvet, it's easy to see them as simple art, or maybe magical symbols for a successful hunt. But look closer. Many of these paintings aren't random. They show animal migration routes. They depict hunting strategies, like herding bison into a trap. They are, in effect, the world's first instructional manuals and strategic maps. They are a way to encode complex, life-or-death information and pass it down through generations. A young hunter could learn from the accumulated experience of 50 elders he'd never even met, just by studying the stories on the wall. But the stories went far beyond practical instruction. This is where we see the birth of true mythology. Shared stories created shared values. They established norms of behavior that allowed cooperation to extend beyond your immediate kin. A story about a hero who shared food with a stranger during a famine wasn't just entertainment, it was a social contract. It taught everyone that helping others, even those outside your band, was a valued action. It built a culture of trust. We see physical evidence of this in the skeletons they left behind. Archaeologists find individuals with severe injuries, a healed broken femur, a crippled arm, who live for years after being disabled. In a pure survival of the fittest scenario, these people would have been left behind. But they weren't. Their group cared for them. This suggests something profound. They valued the person beyond their immediate utilitarian contribution. Perhaps the injured elder was the keeper of the stories, the one who remembered the route to the summer hunting grounds or a technique for building a shelter in a blizzard. Their survival was tied to the survival of the group's collective knowledge. The story of who we are included caring for one another. And during the hardest times, during the depths of winter when resources were scarcest, this is when ritual and ceremony became most important. Gathering for a ceremony wasn't a luxury. It was essential social maintenance. It reinforced bonds, resolved tensions, and reminded everyone of their shared identity and purpose. In a world where you could easily turn on each other out of desperation, these stories and rituals were the social glue that kept the cooperative system from fracturing. They were a technology for managing human psychology under extreme stress. The stories allowed them to plan for futures they couldn't yet see, to coordinate actions across vast distances, and to maintain the faith that their network would be there for them when they needed it most. The survival of the body became dependent on the health of the story. This brings us to the engine of the entire system, the gift. We find the evidence in their graves. An individual buried with a necklace made of shells from a sea hundreds of miles away. A spear point crafted from obsidian that originated in distant mountains. These weren't just status symbols. They were the archaeological footprints of a vast, continent-spanning economy built not on trade, but on reciprocity. This was a gift economy, and its purpose was pure survival insurance. Think of it like this. Your band lives in a valley rich with berries and game in the summer, but vulnerable to harsh winters. Another band lives near a river that provides a steady supply of fish year-round, but lacks good stone for tools. You, over the summer, craft an exquisite spear point from the fine stone in your valley. You don't need it immediately, so you give it as a gift to your contacts by the river. There's no immediate exchange, but you have now created an obligation. Months later, when your valley is buried in snow and the game is gone, you can travel to that river group. Because of the gift, you are not a beggar. You are a partner calling in a reciprocal obligation. They share their fish with you. That spear point you gave away in a time of plenty effectively stored calories for your future self. It was a biological survival strategy disguised as a social one. These gifts created a safety net that was distributed across the landscape, protecting everyone from local failures. The cognitive sophistication this required is staggering. It meant being able to think in terms of delayed gratification on a scale of months or years. It required a theory of mind, the ability to understand that the person you're giving a gift to will remember that gift and feel obligated to repay it in the future. You had to maintain a mental map of social relationships with people you might only see once every few years. It was an exercise in long-term investment and trust. This is the direct ancestor of what we now call social capital. In the modern world, we build professional networks, help colleagues, and maintain friendships, knowing that these connections might yield opportunities or support later. The principle is identical. In a world of
scarcity, whether it's scarce food or scarce job opportunities, your network is your most valuable asset. The Ice Age humans who mastered the art of the gift, who understood that generosity was a strategic investment in their own resilience, were the ones who thrived. They discovered that the most powerful tool for survival wasn't something you held in your hand, but something you held in your mind, a web of mutual obligation and trust. They turned other humans from potential rivals into their greatest resource. But this delicate web of cooperation wasn't foolproof. It was a system under constant pressure, and when it snapped, the consequences were immediate and brutal. For all the evidence of long-distance trade and care for the injured, archaeologists also find the grim reminders of what happened when the social contract broke down. At sites like Offnet Cave in Germany, we find mass graves, skulls, many of them belonging to women and children, showing clear signs of violent trauma. These aren't the results of hunting accidents. They are the scars of conflict, a stark contrast to the narrative of widespread harmony. These collapses typically happened when environmental shocks became too severe, too rapid for the network to absorb. Imagine a perfect storm of the Ice Age, a series of harsh winters in succession, depleting the gift reserves and the goodwill between groups. When every band is fighting for its own survival, the calculus shifts. The distant partner you once helped is now seen as a competitor for the last remaining resources. The very social bonds that were a strength become a vulnerability if they lead you to trust when you should be wary. The balance between cooperation and competition is incredibly delicate. This reveals the true nature of their survival strategy. It wasn't about being peaceful by nature. It was about being pragmatic. Cooperation was the most effective tool for navigating a volatile world, but it was a choice, one that had to be constantly reinforced and maintained. When the system failed, it highlighted just how essential it was. An isolated group, cut off from its network, was incredibly vulnerable. Their fate was tied directly to the health of their social connections. Maintaining those bonds, through storytelling, ritual, and gift-giving, wasn't a secondary activity. It was as crucial to their survival as the hunt itself. It was a daily priority, because they knew the cost of failure. So what's the lesson for us? living in a world with central heating and grocery stores, we face a different kind of ice age. Our environment isn't defined by glaciers, but by the rapid, unpredictable shifts of technology, the climate of social media, and the scarcity of reliable information and genuine connection. Our digital networks are the modern equivalent of those ancient trade routes. They have the same potential to spread innovation and create resilience, but also the same vulnerability to misinformation and conflict. The resource that's scarce today isn't food, but attention, trust, and meaningful collaboration. In this environment, the ancient skill of building and maintaining a diverse, resilient social network is more crucial than ever. It's your buffer against professional obsolescence, your early warning system for industry shifts, your source of support during personal crises. The lesson from the Ice Age is that the ability to connect, collaborate, and build trust with a wide range of people is the ultimate adaptive skill. It's what allowed a seemingly less adapted species to not just survive, but to thrive and eventually dominate the planet. Your network is your greatest asset. In a world of constant change, investing in genuine human connections is the modern equivalent of gifting that obsidian spear point. It's building your insurance policy for the future. The real secret to Ice Age survival was seeing other humans not as rivals, but as the most valuable resource on the planet. That shift in perspective is the crucial lesson we can apply today. If you want more of these hidden stories from history that connect directly to modern life, subscribe to Laugh and Learn Lab. There's always another untold story waiting.